I've heard from many of you in the days since the attack on the Capitol, threatening another censure for what I said about the president's lies after the election. As a friend and fellow Republican, I want to shoot straight. I'm not going to spend any time trying to talk you out of another censure. I listen to Nebraskans every day, and very few of them are as angry about life as some of the people on this committee. Not all of you, but a lot. Political addicts don't represent most Nebraska conservatives. When Melissa and I first ran back in 2014, we spoke with hundreds of thousands across this gorgeous state, and we promised to speak out when our leaders, not just Democrats, but any leader in either party, crossed the line. We pledged to put the Constitution ahead of party politics. You gave me standing ovations. My election night speech, the first time I ever ran for or got elected to anything, was a simple promise that I would always vote my conscience, even if it might be against the partisan stream. You cheered. But many of the same party officials who applauded in 2014 cussed me out in 2016 when I refused to vote for candidate Trump, and again when I declined to serve on his re-election committee in 2019, and again when I didn't vote for him in 2020. Now, many of you are hacked off that I condemned his lies that led to a riot. Let's be clear. The anger in the state party has never been about me violating principle or abandoning conservative policy. I'm one of the most conservative voters in the Senate. The anger has always been simply about me not bending the knee to one guy. But my disagreements with President Trump have never been personal. They've always been about genuine affection for the constitutional order, something every American, regardless of party, should share. January 6th is going to leave a scar. For 220 years, one of the most beautiful things about America has been our peaceful transfer of power. But what Americans saw 3 weeks ago was ugly. Shameful mob violence to disrupt a constitutionally mandated meeting of the Congress to affirm that peaceful transfer of power. It happened because the president lied to you. He lied about the election results for 60 days, despite losing 60 straight court challenges, many of them handed down by wonderful Trump-appointed judges. He lied by saying that the vice president could just violate his constitutional oath and declare a new winner. That wasn't true. He then riled a mob that attacked the Capitol, many chanting, "Hang Pence." If that president were a Democrat, we both know how you'd respond. But because he had Republican behind his name, you're defending him. Something has definitely changed over the last 4 years, but it's not me. Personality cults aren't conservative. Conspiracy theories aren't conservative. Lying that an election has been stolen, it's not conservative. Acting like politics is a religion, it isn't conservative. You are welcome to censure me again, but let's be clear about why this is happening. It's because I still believe, as you used to, that politics isn't about the weird worship of one dude. The party could purge Trump skeptics, but I'd like to convince you that not only is that civic cancer for the nation, it's just terrible for our party. But either way, I'm going to keep doing what I promised. We're going to have to choose between conservatism and madness, between just trolling versus actually persuading the rising generation of Americans again.
For even Ben Sasse, who, despite his rhetoric, is still one of the most conservative members of the Senate, to have to issue this video is a testament to just how far off the deep end the Republican Party has gone in its desperation to kowtow to Trump. And remember, this is all being done for a guy who lost. The Republican Party is only further demeaning itself for a failed candidate. Trump lost by 7 million votes in the popular vote. He lost by an electoral college margin of 306 to 232, the same margin that he himself called a landslide in 2016. And that is who the GOP is punishing their members who actually won their elections for? And yet this is a trend we've seen across the country. South Carolina's GOP censured lawmaker Tom Rice. Arizona's GOP censured their governor Doug Ducey for not helping Trump overturn the election, along with former Senator Jeff Flake and Cindy McCain for supporting Biden. Liz Cheney faced censure from a number of Wyoming counties and nearly lost her leadership position in the House. That is who's being punished. Not the guy who incited an insurrection by virtue of repeating the lie that the election was stolen over and over and over. Not the guy who manipulated half of the country in order to keep himself in power. Not the guy who, for the first time in American history, refused to abide by the peaceful transition of power. No, the people who were punished were those who sought to hold him accountable. but sure, definitely not a cult. By this logic, you could rob someone, you could steal a car, you could, shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, and so long as you're a Republican, the GOP would stand up not for the victim, but for the perpetrator. And yet somehow, this is the party that calls itself the Law and Order Party. Sure, rally behind the guy who incited an insurrection that led to a dead police officer and several dead Republican voters. Yup, sure sounds like the defenders of law and order to me. The very simple fact is that Trump had his opportunity to validate any of the claims he was making about a stolen election, and yet by the end of his disinformation campaign, he'd been rebuked in 65 court cases by his own DOJ, his own DHS, his own party's governors, his own party's secretaries of state. And so all that these state parties are doing by continuing to carry water for Trump, even after his claims were disproven, is showing that they don't actually stand for anything. Not the rule of law, not the Constitution, not democracy. They stand for Donald Trump. The lies and misinformation notwithstanding, he is what the GOP answers to. The fact is that the Republican Party got so wrapped up in their undying allegiance to their king, Donald Trump, that they lost sight of what actual Americans want. And they lost sight of the fact that, first and foremost, Americans don't want a despot undermining a free and fair election so that he could anoint himself the ruler of America. And so while these Republican politicians went to the wall to try and save him, they only made themselves look that much more radical in the eyes of everyday Americans who weren't as hell-bent on installing a dictator as Republican officials were. The GOP made the conscious decision to sacrifice democracy for Donald Trump. And by the way, they're paying the price. More than 30,000 voters who'd been registered Republicans changed their voter registrations in the weeks after the Trump-inspired insurrection at the Capitol. And a number of them came from swing states where the GOP desperately needs to keep their footing. Nearly 10,000 Pennsylvania voters dropped their Republican Party affiliation, 6,000 North Carolina Republicans left the party, 5,000 Arizona Republicans, and thousands more in Florida. I'm starting to think that Republican officials might not have a great handle on what Americans are actually thinking these days. So Republicans can pretend that they stand for whatever platitudes they prop up, but their actions speak far louder than words. And those actions make it clear that all they care about is Donald Trump. Forget that he's the one Republican who actually managed to lose in the last election. At some point, they should probably recognize that they're only doing themselves more harm than good by clinging on to hope that maybe, just maybe, the guy who lost actually won. He didn't, and it's time to move on. The rest of the country already has. While you're here, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I take a deep dive into the top stories of the week, and I also interview major players in the world of politics, like Kamala Harris, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Pete Buttigieg, Katie Porter, Al Franken, Cory Booker, Jamie Harrison, Mary Trump, and many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.